Joining us. I'm showing 5:30. I will call to order the regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education. It is September 27th, and I'll invite you to join us to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, I'll look for approval of the agenda. Jim.
I move approval of the agenda with the addition of the HR addendum that was at our work locations to be added to item 7B under the consent agenda.
I will second that.
Okay, motion by Jim, seconded by Robin. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to the recognition of the audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or to debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 5 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. I will now call our first speaker to the podium, which is Devin Stachinsky. Welcome.
You might want to get out a pen. I have a bunch of questions that I would like written responses to based on several of your memos for tonight's meeting. But let's start with the check register. I have a couple questions for clarifying purposes about how some of the material is coded for what you put out to the public. You have 10 pages that are listed, that have material listed as general fund / supplies. What supplies? I'd like to see something that actually tells us what you're running off and spending $83 for, $43 for, $80 for, $98 for, because it just says supplies. I don't mind if it's coded as textbook, because obviously textbook, and that's coded differently. But also way back on page 90, you have 6 line items that say, that are out of your nutrition services fund. They're just listed as petty cash. 6 line items for $30 each. What is that? I didn't think as a government entity you could just list things as petty cash in your check register. Moving on to memo 35. I find it kind of interesting that all of you mark compliance for GP 10 for board covenants, especially section 2, where it says that members will not embarrass each other or the district. Well, you have a full non-compliance there because of the events of August, the start of August, intentionally misleading and misinforming. I think some of that might have been going on, as well as maintaining hidden agendas, but that can't be proven by me as an outsider. So I find it interesting that all of you go along with marking compliance on things when the only person who's willing to actually mark non-compliance for any of your GP policies is the one who caused non-compliance in GP 10. Moving on from that, we're going to move on to Memo 42, which is the long-range plan. I'd like to know why the planning committee thought it appropriate to, after the first reading, having a meeting and adding in, and I quote, "Per consensus of the planning committee, additional needs and possible actions discussed at the September 20th, 2022 meeting were not previously included and have been added to the long-range plan in this updated version. This addition, titled Horace Mann Roosevelt Madison, is the only change made since the first reading." Building a school is a pretty substantial change to your long-range plan. You would think that you would need another first reading because that's a major change. Moving away from the agenda items for tonight and something that was brought to my attention by a parent, Fargo policy AP 4721 states that Fargo Public School requires a child's parent, guardian, or legal custodian to present the school with proof of the child's identity within 40 days of enrollment in compliance with North Dakota Century Code 12-60-26. So why is it that a parent brought to our attention today that Davies High School decided to... Tracy, this is important.
It's 5 minutes. Sorry, we don't, chime.
I got 18 seconds left. The timer is running. Anyway, why did Davies High School decide to go into Power School and change the child's name without parental notice? 3, 2, 1.
Okay, next tonight is Kristen Charbonneau.
Kristen Charbonneau. I live in the, I guess technically the Claire Barton neighborhood. Dakota High School is a great asset to our community and the school district, but I do have a concern. It's been brought to my attention that there's no transportation provided for these students, and I know that this is a big hindrance to some students being able to participate, and is probably contributing to some of our students not being able to graduate. So I'm asking the board to take that into consideration and see if something can be done about that. One simple solution would be for students to be able to, we already have busing to all the high schools, for maybe transportation to be provided from the high schools to Dakota high schools to make sure that all students are able to participate in that program. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers for the evening. Okay, I think we can go ahead and start with the staff reports. I just want to make a note that the public hearing we need to do is time specific, so we'll need to just kind of pause what we're doing right at 6 o'clock. But if people are comfortable, I think we could go ahead and start because that's another 22 minutes away. Sound good? Okay. So our first staff report is the engagement and experience in co-curricular activities monitoring. 2021-2022 activities report. This is in memo number 32 being presented. Actually, I'll turn it to you, Rupak, for introduction.
Sure. I'll hand it over to Todd Olson, our Student Activities Director, here in just a second. Just a reminder to board members that as we now are operating under the new strategic plan, we have a new governing process for our results policy monitoring. This would be one of the first results as a lagging indicator from the year before. So you're going to get years from previous data, but we did change it to the indicators for monitoring the strategic initiative is an analysis, not just the data itself. So then we can actually address some of the barriers or opportunities that we have as a district to make some progress based on some of the questions that we have to better serve our students as well. So that's what this report is. This will then become the monitoring report for that results policy. And I'll hand it over to Todd Olson.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity tonight to talk to about some of the good things we have going on in our student activities program. I've put together just a few slides I will run through. Most of the slides are a summary of what is in Appendix D which is our participant satisfaction survey, and then I'll take any questions you might have. Why aren't I playing here, Jared? All right, we surveyed this spring, we had a little over 1,900 students who responded to our survey. That's down a little bit. We had some competing surveys in May of last year that's one of the things we're gonna analyze is when's a better window for us to do that. Results, first of all, some demographic information. Roughly 75% of the kids who responded to the survey indicated that they did participate. You can see our gender breakdown by school. Then our breakdown by grade, we had pretty good representation. About half of the respondents indicated that the majority of their participation was in athletics. And my favorite slide every year, number one reason for participation, it's fun. And look where winning ends up. It's always interesting to me, and kids always say it's fun. Here are some of the other areas we surveyed. We talk about kids need to be connected to their school and cared for. Over 90% indicate that they are. Positive character development, again, in the 90s. We talk about sportsmanship, citizenship, collaboration, respect. Similar results. Feeling safe. I feel pretty good about this when almost 98% of our kids say they feel safe in their activities. One of the things that we hear about as administrators is oftentimes communication from our coaches, our directors, and our advisors. And here, well over 90% of our kids are saying they were communicated with positively. Our coaches, advisors, and directors were knowledgeable. So are we hiring the right people? It appears to be the case. Be a good teammate. We hear that all the time, that's something that every business industry wants is people who can work together. Our kids feel good about that. I'm a better student because of participation in activities. This is actually our lowest one on the agree scale every year because there are different activities where the time demands at different times of the year get to be a lot. You know, I think of our kids who are in drama productions. How many hours are they putting in the weeks leading up to that? When I coached basketball, it was always my kids who golfed. Well, every Wednesday for a month and a half, they're on a golf course because golf courses won't let us out there on Saturday or Sunday or Friday even. Then we asked the reason for not participating. And our number one response almost every year is just not interested. And along with that, we ask, well, what that we don't offer are you participating in? We offer a lot of good things, but there are also a lot of good things in our community that kids are doing that we just don't offer. Next thing we do is we always do an analysis of GPA. Dell can pull out a power school based on who took the co-curricular online meeting or who turned in a physical card. And we show that our participants, once again, have a higher GPA than our non-participating students and pretty significantly higher than our overall GPA. Another one of our items that we analyze is the number of Team Scholar Awards that our 3 comprehensive high schools earn each year. And this remains remarkably consistent. It's high 50s, low 60s almost every year. This past year it was 58. The Team Scholar is something that's only given out by North Dakota High School Activities Association sanctioned activities. So our music contests, our speech, debate, our sports, the things that they have as sanctioned activities. So 58 is a pretty good number. I always finish up with this. Here are the state tournaments that we're hosting in this community during this school year. You can see we got pretty good coverage in fall, winter, and spring, and one really busy weekend in the spring. It's the nice part about having 7 Class A schools in your community. There's some division of labor that can happen. And that's all I have, other than to say thank you for supporting our activities. I'm always very proud of the wide variety and the quality of the activities program that we have in the Fargo Public Schools. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Todd. I, for one, have 3 kids in the Fargo Public Schools, and they all have personally benefited in some way from the co-curricular activities offered. So thank you from our family. Any board members have questions or comments? Nikki?
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate this report every year, and I love to see the numbers like you do. I too have 3 kids. All have been involved at some level, some way, somewhere, somehow. And I believe it's an excellent opportunity for them and as well for Fargo schools. I'm very proud of everything that we have to offer, and I appreciate your putting it together like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim?
And Todd, I don't need an answer tonight because I'm sure you don't have it off the top of your head, but I actually think the Team Scholar Award was probably the most important slide I saw there because it truly is indicative of the commitment the students are making, not just whatever team or activity they're on, but also academically. Is that data that we could compare districts to districts? For instance, other school districts, Bismarck, West Fargo, Grand Forks, Minot, Williston, the bigger districts, is that data that might be available to see how do we stack up in terms of our participants and their academic achievement? Obviously, we can always measure who got the football championship trophy, but I actually think this is a more important award.
I will reach out to the High School Activities Association and see if they keep a history. I honestly don't know. We send in our information and they send us a certificate that you see in all of our high school trophy cases. They're pretty proudly displayed.
Absolutely, as it should be. Thank you.
Nima?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's really wonderful. You did a wonderful job, Todd. There's a question that a couple of minority from diversity group been wondering about. In order for the kids to be active in co-curriculums activity, do they have to pay the fee in order for them to play for the sport?
There is a fee for students. However, we have a waiver that's tied to the free and reduced meals where kids can get either a reduced or a free ability to participate. We have a lot of students that take advantage of that.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope that if they are watching, they can hear what I just said. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Greg?
I guess to kind of piggyback off that, I know, this is data from last year, and the strategic plan was just recently revised, so I know this report may not match up exactly kind of what this board's stated goals were, but I guess kind of along the same lines of what Nimal was discussing. I was hoping to see more information about the data broken out by student subgroup. I know there was some amount of that, but I think I'd like to see more, and I think to more fulfill the strategic plan and the results policy in place, I think we should see more breakdown by subgroup.
Thank you.
Nima?
I thought of a question while he was he was talking. Sorry. So you mentioned that that in order for the student to participate, especially the one that with lower income, and they are part of the reduced lunch. What about those students that they are not part of the reduced lunch, but they just they're not qualified for it, for the reduced lunch, but can they still participate, or do they have to pay the $50 or more to participate still?
That's usually a conversation with our building activity coordinator and the student or parents. I mean, I know when I was a building activity coordinator, I would have people come in and say, my husband lost his job or my wife lost her job. And we would waive that.
So is there a reason why we have to put fee on activity like this for the sport to participate?
I think just traditionally, it's always been done. It's a pretty nominal fee compared to a lot of places around the country where it's hundreds of dollars.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Okay, it's 5:50. Just trying to think. We could take a 10-minute break, or we could just power through or start the standard of effort. How do people feel? Should we start? Okay, you don't mind if I interrupt you, Jackie? Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Olson. Yeah, challenge. Can you get through it in 10 minutes? Okay, so our next item is the standard of effort report. This is memo number 33, Jackie Gap.
Thank you, and yes, it's going to be a pretty abridged version of the report. I gotta wait for my code to pop up here. I will throw it out there for people. There's just a lot of data in this report that is difficult to spend time to go through each specific area. So I would ask that if there are any questions on anything that I don't do an overview of, that you have questions on, just please get a hold of us and we'll make sure to get you an answer to that. A couple of things I'd like to mention about the report. This is for information that is from the 2020-21 school year. So keep that in mind that it is lagging. It's a lagging report. And the majority of the data comes from the school finance reports that districts submit. I would also like to remind everyone that there often isn't a set specific method that you maybe code items or you present the items on that school district financial report. So it's up to districts and how they are doing that from their accounting system. So it's also sometimes you may see some disparity that can be explained just by how people reported things. Nothing being right or wrong, it's just a method of interpretation sometime from the people who are completing that report. So I'm going to pop down. I'm kind of going to skip over all of the mill levy, that type of thing. I think that's all been presented to most people in the past. And I'm also going to peruse right over revenue. The revenues for the districts have been relatively comparable as in the past, where you're getting most people around that 60% in state. And then the fill-in with property taxes and the small percentage from federal usually, and that's no different in this report as well. The one thing then I would like to point out is we talk about expenditures, and we often talk about our FTEs in comparison to other districts. And so I would like first to point out that in this report where the information comes from, it is only relevant to people who hold a certified teaching license. So when we're even looking at administrators, for example, I'm not included in those numbers, nor is any business manager in the state. I don't hold, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. They might hold a teaching certificate, so they might be, but I don't. So just kind of to keep that in mind, that when we're talking FTEs, they are the certified staff. And so you can kind of see the comparisons that we have there. The one very important thing to point out as we're talking about our teaching staff is that Fargo does continue to have the highest percentage of teachers holding a master's degree. So we should be very proud of our teaching staff for that. And the other thing in that table below, just like to point out that as far as discussing salary matrices and trying to compare those, which is often very difficult, Fargo does have one of the best from the standpoint of we allow for unlimited credit of years of service coming into our district, as well as a relatively short period of time for advancement to what you can tell the top of the scale. So we'd just like to point that out. Fargo also does have one of the lowest student to teacher ratios. I think that's an important statistic to keep in mind. And I'm kind of going to skip over all the details in the salary and benefits pieces. Would also, though, just like to point out, as we're talking about contracts a little bit, is that we also do have the longest contract for our teachers at 190 days to the districts that are compared in this report. Kind of got to check my notes out. I'm going to also skip over a lot of the support staff items. We'll take a pause here again as we're talking about administrators and comparing to other districts. Again, only certified positions are in these roles for that. And I would like to just quickly show from a maintenance and operations standpoint, to give them a little bit of a shout out for the 29 properties they manage and almost 2.9 million square feet of space that they take care of from a custodial perspective, and then just the amount of grounds that our groundskeepers also maintain for us. Quite an impressive number, I think. When we get into transportation, that is always a topic as well. We do spend the most on transportation, and most of that recently in the last few years has almost become for Fargo schools a split, almost 50-50 with the amount we spend on regular ed transportation and special ed transportation. This is an area too where I would caution, I think there may be some disparity in how other districts are reporting some of their transportation costs and how they're breaking those out. And I'm going to kind of pass over a little bit of the Trollwood pieces. I missed though, and sorry if I'm causing your eyes to go crazy. Would like to stop just for a minute on the ending fund balance, and at June 30th of 2021, we were at 2.46 months of operating expenditures in our general fund, which is just above what the Government Financial Officers Association recommends at 2.3. So if you kind of look at that compared with the other districts, we are sitting in a very good place from that perspective. And the last item that I will touch on before we take some questions will be special education. And I think the big thing to point out with special ed really is the shortfall in funding, where the federal government years and years ago said that they would fund 40%. They are nowhere near that. And in fact, I think that that gap is growing even more. And then that result causes us to have to utilize our local and ask for additional state funding to try to cover that shortfall in those expenditures. So that was a very short and abridged, touching on some highlight items that I think are important on this report. And now I guess I would wonder if we want to ask questions or if you want to take a little pause.
We're sitting at 5:58. Does anyone have a very short comment? Okay.
I do.
Do these have to be right at 6 or? Yeah, okay. You have 2 minutes. Name all.
Sorry. Said we're talking about salary, so it came to my mind as I was like talking to a couple of teachers, and especially in para educator. And I should have brought in the letter that I received, and how concerned it is to me, and you can correct me too, if I'm wrong somewhere. Quick questions. What is the starting salary per para?
I would wish we had a director of human resources here at the moment. I can look that up for you. Boy, I want to say it's around $15, but
So from the letter that I read, it's $14.75.
Bob is doing his best over there to quickly pull up our matrix. Take a look. I would say that isn't too far off, though,
Too far off?
from a starting.
Okay, good.
We appreciate you guys all jointly playing Doug for the interim.
Okay, so I know there are, I've been around, not too much, not too long. It's just been a couple of months or so. And it's just that a lot of paras, especially all our
Hey,
schools.
I'm gonna just pause you, Nima.
Okay.
I apologize how fragmented this is, you guys. It is 6 p.m. And so, like I said, this is just a time-specific item. So we will now open a public hearing in compliance with NDCC 571502.2. Citizens have an opportunity to present oral or written comments regarding the property tax levy for Fargo Public Schools. So we will invite anyone to speak at this time. Welcome. Oh, I think your mic, if you just want to turn your mic on. Thank you.
I was waiting over at South High because that's where they said the meeting was supposed to be, so I don't know if anybody else is over there. They said at the auditorium at South High at 6 o'clock. So that's what I received in the mail. I am concerned about the level of taxes. I'm also concerned about the type of education that's being done with those taxes. North Dakota Constitution, Article 8, says a high degree of intelligence, patriotism, integrity, and morality on the part of every voter in the government by the people being necessary in order to ensure the continuance of that government and the prosperity and happiness of the people. The Legislative Assembly shall make provision for the establishment and maintenance of a system of public schools which shall be open to the children of the state of North Dakota and free from sectarian control. That's Section 1. Section 3 states, in all schools, instruction shall be given as far as practicable in those branches of knowledge that tend to impress upon the mind of the vital importance of truthfulness, temperance, purity, public spirit, and respect for honest labor of every kind. That is what our state constitution says your responsibility is to put together a school program. And I realize you have a difficult situation. I mean, you've got a lot of things to do, but you need to adhere to the Constitution. This last week, I spoke or a week ago, I guess it was, I spoke at the City Commission meeting. I'm concerned about the impact of property taxes on people. At this point in time, I have enough money to live, but I'm 70 years old. And one day I'm going to have to quit working. And even though I have my house paid for, taxes could become an issue. At the meeting, there was an 84-year-old woman who approached me using a walker after the meeting. She said, I came because I wanted to say what you said, but I was afraid to say it and I didn't know exactly how to do it. She said, I'm 84 years old. I live on Social Security. I have minimal savings. My house is paid for, but I have to pay for my taxes every year with a credit card. I want to tell you that's a crisis and something horrible waiting to happen. Afterwards, I talked to Mayor Mahoney. He said, well, she can go and get a homestead credit. So I found out where she lived. I went back and talked to her and I said, well, have you applied for homestead credit? She said, well, I did, but they said because I've got my house paid for, my net worth is too much. And I'm going, so in other words, she has to sell her house or take out a loan on her house and make a payment on that loan in order to get a tax credit so that she possibly won't lose her house to taxes. That's disturbing. But even more disturbing is what some of the money is being used for. As I said, Article 3 made the statement that part of education is the importance of truthfulness, temperance, purity, public spirit, and respect. There's two forms of education. One is classic, and the other is a form that was introduced by John Dewey, which has become the main form of education in our country today. That form is sectarian in nature, and our Constitution says that we're not supposed to be sectarian. One of you at the school board meeting in reference to the Pledge of Allegiance made the statement, that's very Judeo-Christian when we say God. To me, the most important issue wasn't the Pledge of Allegiance, because like the statement was made, I can say the pledge and don't have to say God, or I can mean God to be anything to me. But the real issue is, what is the foundation of our education, and what am I having to pay for? It's interesting. I just wanted to give you a definition out of Webster's Dictionary of sectarian, which is in our Constitution. A sect is a body of men who unite in holding some particular views, especially religious or philosophical. And these who dissent from an established creed or system, it's a party. Sectarianism is excessive devotion to a sect, and that's a point of view. I don't know what any one of you believe, and personally, you have the right to believe whatever you want. But when it impacts the lives of children to the point that it violates our Constitution, that becomes an issue to me, and it really becomes an issue to me when one day I may lose my home to pay for that. The current value system that has become the religious underbelief that has penetrated the public schools, and I'm not going to change the public school system, I understand that, but I want you to think about what you're doing with my dollars. About 25 or 30 years ago, my wife and I were delusional enough to think that we could change things. We were involved in a group called Citizens for Excellence in Education. At that time in the Fargo school system, in the health classes for ninth graders, there was a health manual that was being used. We knew one of the teachers in that class, she refused to use it because she says, I'm here to teach health. That manual consisted of teaching kids all of the drug paraphernalia and their uses. It teach them all of the techniques of sex. It also taught them situational ethics to the point that you had ninth graders sitting down, and this was the story they were told. A young woman had a fiance. Her fiance was ill, and he lived on the other side of a river, and she was on the side of the river where the doctor was. She had to make a decision because the doctor needed to get there, and the only way he could get there was on the raft.
Sir, I'm just going to have a brief point of order here.
Okay.
We're inviting people to speak specifically on the tax levy, not necessarily the operations of our schools. So if you
Okay,
could
well,
just
could
stick
I
to.
just, I won't go into the story then. I'll just want
Thank
to, I want to close because it is an issue with the tax levy on what's being, and I just want to share a couple things that I'm aware of that are happening today. I know someone who works in a public school, and I asked her, how'd your week go? Well, I didn't get hit today or a chair thrown at me. I also know that in one of the classes at one of the middle schools, the kids were opened up with the teacher saying, you can do whatever you want and be whatever you want. If you want to be a dog, you can be a dog. If you want to be a cat, you can be a cat. My tax dollars are going for that. I don't see where that's in the state constitution. And I'm looking at your funding that you're asking for. It's a huge amount of money. And I understand this school district is a big district. But I also know that you are currently looking and going to discuss tonight about hiring 2 people that, from what I'm discerning from their description of their titles, will be involved with problems within the kids. And you're going to be paying about $160,000 in salaries plus benefits plus Social Security for them. That's my money. That's my tax money. That's taxes going up. And I'm going, classical education teaches math, reading, history. It doesn't teach transgenderism, critical race theory, and other things that have nothing to do with a child learning, but it's a way that we impede a value system onto those children that result in us having to hire counselors and having our teachers have chairs thrown at them and being hit. So I ask you to think about what these dollars are. I studied the budget. I can't tell you where you're using your money other than it says that administration gets about $8 million. Teachers get about $38 million. But beyond that, I can't tell where stuff goes. I can see where some of it goes. But what are you using to fund some of those strange things that have nothing to do with what education says is in our Constitution? I do really appreciate your time. I thank you for giving me more time than I probably should have had. But I do really ask you to think about what you are doing, because you are dealing with the values of young people, and I think you know that. And some of you may have an agenda that flies in the face of what the agenda of our state constitution says. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being here. Anyone else wanting to speak on this issue?
This will be a lot faster than earlier. My favorite thing of the last 2-ish years was how we were repeatedly told, oh, we can't compare to other school districts. Oh, we can't compare to other school districts. Oh, we can't compare to other school districts. West Fargo has a lot more kids per classroom, and they're beating you in every metric. Every metric. I think you should reevaluate how much administration uses, how much some of these other side projects use, so we can actually get our success numbers up for the students. Because I mean, your budget is not small, 185 million and change, or at least last one was. And Neamal, this is for that thing you asked about before. $4,787,000 have been, what is the exact wording? General fund transferred for student activities. You might want to tell the parents to look there.
Okay, again, this is a public hearing for comments regarding the property tax levy of Fargo Public Schools. Does anyone have further comments for that topic? Okay, thank you to our speakers. It is 6:14 and I will close the hearing. Everyone doing okay to power on here? Okay, I believe we had just completed the standard of effort report and Namal was asking some questions. I'll turn it over to you, Jackie.
Found your rates for you. So paraprofessionals start at, or paraeducators, the range is 1506, so that would be starting, and that range goes up to 1985.
Okay, thank you. Is that include you said 1885?
The top of the scale would be 1985.
1985. Is that including like the Experian or thing like that?
Yes, that would, either be someone who is quite experienced or has been with us for probably a few years,
Okay.
depending on where they're placed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board members have questions in regards to the standard of effort report? Yes, Greg.
So I definitely appreciate, Jackie, that you mentioned that there's no hard and fast standard of this is what everyone has to report, and it does make comparisons potentially difficult. And I definitely had that in mind while I was reading this over the weekend. But there is one thing that I did have a question about that I don't know if there's like an easy explanation or something like that, but one thing jumped out as potentially concerning or notable. So we have the lowest student to teacher ratio, which I think is great. And yet it appears when it comes to administration, we just have a huge number of assistant principals compared to any other district. And it doesn't we have more buildings than most, but we have the same number of schools as West Fargo, 27, according to page 15 here. And yet they have half as many assistant principals. And I'm not saying that assistant principals aren't great. A lot of times I know from my wife's experience that she shares with me all the time that assistant principals are often very important when it comes to dealing with student behavior. But gee, we have the lowest student to teacher ratio, and yet we still have a huge number of assistant principals. And I wondered if maybe other districts don't employ licensed teachers. Is that the explanation for why we have double, or if there's some other reporting error or something like that, or if, as one of our guests mentioned earlier, is potentially part of a bloated administration budget.
Rupang?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, we've, this has been a conversation within our district for a couple of years. So until about 3 or 4 years ago at the elementary level, Fargo Public Schools had an admin intern program that served in the role of assistant principals at the elementary schools. Those were individuals that were teachers on a 2-year what was essentially called internship program. Some of the concerns that were shared at that moment in time were the inconsistency of the in and out. Is it really equitable for teachers to be able to have them to do some of those responsibilities when they're not assistant principals? So that's when we had engaged with the planning committee and started the process of transitioning to the assistant principal program at the elementary level. That also needs to be coupled, and last I checked, I believe at the elementary at West Fargo, they were still doing deans. And deans and assistant principals are different in terms of how they're reported. And because of the administrative license or not, and then there's also regulations in Century Code about being able to do a walkthrough versus an observation, what a dean can do versus an assistant principal can do as well. So that's part of that, to my knowledge.
And I'll actually just share an anecdote if I can. As a parent, my children went to Centennial Elementary. I believe if Leanne Hansen was here, she would agree with this. At that time, she was principal there. And we had 580 students, I believe, there. And she did not have a dean or an assistant principal. and I was serving as the PTO president, and it was a struggle. She was asking for help continuously. She was unable to do her teacher evaluations essentially because all she was doing was discipline issues with that level of kids. So just an end of one example for you, but that was very impactful when she was able to bring on an assistant principal. I think people were more appropriately doing their jobs for the kids. Does anyone else want to comment or answer that? Any other questions, Greg?
I have just kind of a follow-up on what Greg and Dr. Gandhi said. Would it be helpful if we had like a larger capture of like that we included deans in the next document that we have, so that it might look like a little bit more of a comparison? If I understood your comment right, West Fargo has a similar system, but it just might not be captured when you're labeling them as just assistant principals.
Jim?
You are spot on, and it isn't just West Fargo. The way Bismarck might record, Grand Forks, Minot are all gonna be different. To do what you're asking is gonna be a tremendous amount of people hours on Jackie's team. And that would only work if the other districts are willing to actually invest their time to tell us how they are reporting up to the state as well. You know, probably the easiest way to understand this, and Greg, you could probably ask your wife, how many people are in the office at that building, regardless of their title. And I bet you're gonna discover it's about the same number at a West Fargo Elementary building as it is a Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks. So we've asked this question many times of different districts. Sometimes we're doing it for very specific things. One of the things we typically reach out to districts for is to find out the superintendent's compensation package as we think about what we're gonna do for our superintendent. Can't even get apples to apples out of them for that. And some will share, some won't. So very, very difficult to do it. I think a better baseline, and you know, we don't do this in this report, but I actually have this report going back for a couple of decades. So I actually just kind of look at where were we last year versus this year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm more looking at how are we moving as a district, because I've learned long ago I can't really look at these other districts. For instance, one of the things Jackie pointed out in the report was we have a longer teacher contract than everybody else. Well, if you looked at the data, it's because we have 2 more paid holidays than any other district. So we really don't have any more days that they have to physically work, but we will hear that we have the longest teacher contract. We won't hear that we have the most vacation days. So very tough to do that comparison. Long answer, but.
That's fair, thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah, just to capitalize on what Jim was saying as well, but if you are curious, and Jack can correct me because she knows all the different sources for these. So if we are not to do like an informal email exchange with our respective groups and our counterparts, which is then self-selected information and self-reported, traditionally we lean on what the state reporting guidelines are, and that's where Jackie kind of talked about the definition of administration versus what's an administrator versus not. Same thing with what counts a teacher versus not. But the teacher definition also has more, as she put in the standard of effort report, because there's individuals that are on the teacher contract, and then there's individuals that ESPP determines as a classroom teacher. So there's a distinction there as well. But if the main standard report that gets rolled up about personnel to the North Dakota Department of Instruction is called our MIS-03 report. That's the standard report that goes out. And even if you have time, or I can email it later too, but if you just Google the North Dakota DPI MIS-03, you'll see a guideline that says an instructional manual for completing personnel forms for positions requiring a teaching license. It then goes into the definition of what what's an administrator, what's a teacher, what constitutes these positions that we have to roll up to. So that's probably where the reports come from when they're pulled. So you can kind of see where people are doing. So then it does become the difference in what title they use. But those are the definitions that we have to the state. unless we're to then go and manually calculate each of those, so.
Yes, Seth.
Just add to that this report, as helpful as it can be, it there always needs to be a little bit more investigation on every thing you want to look at because of the fact that not everybody reports something. So if you're looking at something and it's interesting or maybe helpful, sometimes it might take a little deeper dive into wondering why those numbers are the way they are. And that's just kind of the nature, I guess, of the report and how people report. So.
Yes, Robin.
I might add that it might be helpful, and I mentioned this in one of the monitoring reports, a lot of these questions could be answered very easily prior to board meetings just by reaching out to an administrator. So we can really have a fruitful conversation about the content of the document itself, because they're pretty easily answered. So just something to think about in the future.
Okay. Any other comments, questions about standard of effort report? Thank you for presenting, Jackie. All right, we will move on to the FEA reports. Kim Rieger indicated to me she is unable to be here this evening, and I don't see anyone else present from the FEA. Kim and I are meeting tomorrow for coffee, so I'll hopefully get somewhat of a report. So Dr. Gandhi, I will turn it over to you for superintendent report.
Thank you. Just two quick things from my report today. First one is a very happy report. We have two people at this board dais, one that's not here today, Anne Marie Campbell and Missy, who are celebrating their birthdays. So happy birthday to both of them. Jackie told me that the second update that I have to share is even happier than the birthdays, which is that we have auditors in town. As part of our annual budget auditing process, board members may be contacted and just to ask some questions regarding the processes we use to make sure that our internal controls for financial regulation are being followed. So if you get contacted or if you have any questions, please reach out to Jackie and I about that process.
Thank you. I think we shared different definitions of happy, Jackie. Okay, so I will look for approval of the consent agenda. Jim.
I move adoption of the consent agenda with the addition of the HR addendum to be added to 7B.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Nikki. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Are we good to keep moving on for a little bit? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Everyone, see the majority of us back here, so we'll resume the meeting. Next item on our agenda is the business section. First item tonight is our Esser retention plan. This comes to us in memo number 40, and I will probably look to you, Jim.
Thank you. Planning looked at this proposal from administration here about a month ago now. There are really two reasons that this is being brought before us. Administration recognized, first of all, the tremendous commitment our employees have been making really since the beginning of the pandemic. And although a lot of the initial issues with the pandemic may be behind us, it's still a very real issue for our employees. That was one of the reasons for this proposal, is to reward those people that have stuck on the job and helped us get through this time. But the other reason, quite frankly, is this community as a whole is struggling to find employees, and there are some employers trying to poach ours, quite frankly, as quite frankly, we're probably trying to poach other people's too. There's a limited labor pool. So anything we can do to not only thank our employees, but also retain them from the administration's perspective is worth consideration. We still have some Esser dollars that can be used, and one of the purposes that you can use Esser dollars for is retention of staff. So this proposal would be funded through using some Esser dollars if the board chooses to move forward with it. In essence, what is being proposed is that any employee who is employed with the district on a on a continual basis, not necessarily full-time, but a regular employee that was employed here on May 26th of this year, if they are still here at the end of November, they would receive an additional pay of $750. It would not be subjected to TFFR, but of course it would be subjected to FICA, and they'd have to pay income tax on it. And they'd get that payment before the end of this year. Any employee who is with the district in a regular position as of November 30th, that is still here at the end of April, April 30th, would be entitled for an additional $750. So the employees that were here on May 26th, that stayed through the entire year, would end up with a total of $1,500. This is not necessarily reoccurring pay. This is a one-time only based upon Esser dollars. Planning looked at it at the time it was presented to planning. It was actually going to be over the same time period, 3 payments of $500. I believe the HR department and payroll processing looked at it and said, could you help us out here? Because that's a lot of manual work. So they want to modify it to 2 payments of $750. Planning looked at it and we thought it sounded like a reasonable plan. We had the funding to pay for it out of Esser. So we said, yes, we'll bring it to the full board for consideration. So at this point in time, on behalf of the Planning Committee, I'll move that we authorize administration to implement the Esser retention plan as presented in memo number 40.
Second.
Thank you for that. So a motion by Jim, seconded by Seth. Any discussion? Yes, Nikki.
I do have a question based on, we had tried last year to bring forth a little bump, and when visited by the FEA, but they talked about a potential contract, I hate to say violation, but it wasn't expected, and there were some issues and questions with that. Should we anticipate any of that with this?
Dr. Gandhi or Jim?
No, I think the standard that was used was different, that they were potentially looking at what they thought could have been a violation, but this would, the contract actually has a provision that says that the school board has the ability to compensate above for anything that they deem necessary as well.
Fantastic, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? I can just share, I was at my site visit today, which I'll tell you a little more about, but I was in a room full of teachers and this came up, and at least the teachers I were around, it was very well received. They actually liked the two payments and they told me to vote in favor of this tonight. So there you go. Greg, did you have a question?
No, I similar experience. I've had people reach out to me, specifically someone from the FEA acting in their capacity as a member of the FEA leadership also expressed to me their support of this.
Thank you for that. Jim?
Well, I certainly believe teachers and administrators all deserve this. I really believe it's going to have huge impact to our non-certified staff, our paraprofessionals that are full-time or regular, not necessarily full-time, but regular staff people, our custodial staff, our food service staff. So this encompasses all of our employees, which is one of the reasons I am wholeheartedly in support of it.
Dr. Gandhi?
Just a couple of comments that I'd like to make. First and foremost, just gratitude for all of our staff. It's been an incredibly challenging last couple of years. One of the reasons that I'm extremely proud of Fargo Public Schools, and I say this over and over again, with the information I have, because that is also not centrally collected, but based off of all of the Esser plans and what we've looked at in our superintendent group, this district has and continues to be the one that invests most of their corona relief dollars in our human capital. And I'm extremely proud of that because we know that we're the district, our employees are the ones that really keep us at the forefront of all of the work that we do. But secondly, I also just want to take some time to acknowledge Jackie and the business service team, because oftentimes she works under, and her entire team works under so many conflicting priorities, whether it's ASPO standards versus wanting to maximize the resources that we can, but also maintain fiscal responsibility for our taxpayers and our community. But it really was her that's been keeping an eye on the tremendous amount of accounting it takes for the amount of Esser dollars that we have, and said we need to continue to do something to appreciate our staff, and this falls under those regulations. So just, business office often gets, especially with our accountants, they keep us in line, but they don't often get the appreciation for bringing forth those great ideas as well. So wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and it's been seconded. Tara, I'll have you call the roll.
Day,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Berkland,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
President Newman.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to item B under business, which is the 2022-23 budget final approval. This is in memo number 41. We preliminarily approved this budget in June, and I think I'll look to you again, Jim.
Thank you. Yes, as President Newman indicated, we did our preliminary approval back in June. This is where we do our final approval, so our business manager can certify this budget over to the county, which is required here in October. Just a couple of changes since we approved this in June. I want to just go through those briefly, and then if there are any questions, we'll take them, but I'll put forward a motion prior to that. There was a $409,400 adjustment to the general fund budget, both on the income and on the expenditure side. Income is just a dialing in more accurately what we anticipate property tax revenue to be based upon the current assessed valuation that we're getting from the county. Quite frankly, that could still move a little bit, but this is our best guess today. And then there's, I think there was 37,000 of additional residential treatment local revenue we're anticipating based upon student placement. Those additional dollars are still going to leave us with a balanced budget because they are going to be allocated to additional transportation costs that we're anticipating and additional special ed contracted services, which are the two major areas in the expenditure side where those additional dollars have went. So that was the change to the general fund. There is a slight change to the building fund, And that was really based on action from the needs of our long-term maintenance plan for our facilities. They're going to allocate a little bit more of our fund balance to contracted maintenance in the coming year to address the chiller issues over at South High. So again, that doesn't change the taxes that we're asking for collection. It just changes where our ending fund balance on the building fund will end up, and we'll still have a positive fund balance. To the other four budgets that we look at, or funds, the special assessment, the special levy, the debt service, and the nutrition service fund, no change whatsoever from what was presented back in June. With that, on behalf of the Planning Committee, I will put forward a motion to adopt the final budgets and levy a total of 154.38 mils for 2022-2023 school year, and instruct administration to submit the certificate of levy to the county auditor.
Great, thank you.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Robin. Any discussion? Okay, thank you, Jim. Tara, I'll have you call the roll.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Berkland,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Day.
Yes.
President Newman?
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. That brings us to our final item of business this evening, which is the long-range facility plan approval. At our last meeting, we heard the preliminary, the first reading of this. I'll look to Jackie and Jim again. These all came through planning, so.
Thank you. Yes, and I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting where the first reading occurred, but I understand that it was approved by the board at the first reading. The only addition, and this was based on planning committee work from the last meeting we had, one of the long-term issues that we've been trying to address in the district is safe and secure entrances at all of our elementary buildings. And while we certainly now have cameras and locked entrances, we still do not have ideal scenarios in a few of our buildings, quite frankly, because of the design of the building just doesn't allow for it without huge expenditure. And by that I mean, ideally, we would like to be able to visually watch people come into our building, control their access through the office wherever possible before they actually can get into the broader building, having access to staff and students. And for two of our older buildings in the north side, it is an extremely expensive project to do those entrances at Horace Mann or Roosevelt because of the way the stories are in the building and where the entrance and the offices are currently located. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but the can't be done is like anywhere from $2 to $5 million per building. And we're talking buildings that are probably past their prime. I'm going to put it that way as a 67-year-old. Not to say they still don't have good life in them and they're well maintained, but there are other infrastructure needs these buildings are going to have. I'd invite anybody here that hasn't been to Horace Mann to just go take a tour of the building. And when you're in the cafeteria gym area, just look up at the ceiling and you'll probably understand it might be time for us to at least envision what are we going to do long-term with those buildings and potentially Madison. This has been put in as a placeholder for discussions going forward. This is not put in because we're having a recommendation to build a new building based upon this long-range facility plan. It's to recognize we have a need in those two, perhaps three north side elementary buildings. Madison's needs a little different. It's a population issue there of making sure we can have adequate sections so we can do the right things for student-teacher matching. So we just put it in here as something that we need to think about long range, because this is the long range facility plan. One potential idea would be to theoretically build a new building, elementary building, on Horace Mann's site. There's land to do it, big enough property there that we could keep Horace Mann functional while that's being built. That's just one thought. I think the administration's exploring if there are other properties that would be available, but this is not a project that is being recommended for the board's consideration at this point in time. It is a planning need that we will continue to look at through the course of this year and probably a couple years to come until it becomes front and center, the top priority, if that makes sense. So that was the one addition put into this since the first reading. And with that, I'll put forward a recommendation that we approve the updated long-range facility plan as provided under memo 42.
Second.
Seconded by Seth. Any discussion or questions from board members? Greg?
So in recognizing that this is exactly what you said, Jim, this is something to put on the radar. It's not a recommendation, anything hard and fast like that. I would like to note that McKinley Elementary also has concerns about that, the secure entrance where they can view from the administration office. If that's the criteria to make it to this list, I don't think we need to revise it and kick this down to our next meeting. Just to add a couple words, because again, this is just kind of putting things on the radar, but McKinley does have a similar issue.
Thank you for that, Greg. Any other board members? Nemo?
Just echoing to what Jim said. Madison is definitely needs some update. It's not only looking in possibly like a new school or thing like that, but also just looking inside of it because it needs some painting on some of the classroom. Even though there are some update on the other side, but some other side inside the classroom needs some painting because there are a couple of holes there. So, and that's why I'm echoing on what Jim said. It's always good, to look into what we have, first before we plan ahead too as well, just looking into the long range. It's just that if there are concerns that has already been brought to our attention, we should definitely look into them because those are definitely, they can affect our kids, our students, their learning, especially when one of the individual from the schools, is it Hawthorne neighborhood mentioned about the mics in theirs. There's some ceiling holes or certain thing like that. Those are a big concern that we should definitely look into, even though we are looking into the future to really pay attention. I mean, to buy those land ahead of time so that way it wouldn't be too much financials. Definitely let's look into what we have first. Because those are really concerned to me, or maybe to other two as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what you're referencing is since we did this first reading, some of these concerns were brought to us at our planning committee meeting, which is why it was added tonight. And those are the specifics. Yes, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you for the great discussion. And Jim for the great introduction as well. Just a couple of pieces, and Jackie, feel free to chime in if there's anything else. But just for kind of process, our long-range plan also gets updated on an annual basis because sometimes things are moving, as Jackie pointed out earlier, 29 buildings and over 2.5 million square feet. But the second piece is that we try to separate existing facility needs, and we have a priority system for that through the administration to be able to do ticketing and then identify what those needs are. And they might come as separate projects. And then what we try to identify in the long-range facilities plan, that's not the ending, the 10-year maintenance plan, is potential new projects that may not have been there as well. So some of the pieces, I can't speak to it right now. There's a pretty intricate software that we're using to prioritize all of our needs that could already be in the spreadsheet based on needs. And intent down the road is when we are able to fill our next director of maintenance position, would be able to create a committee to take a look at those conflicting needs and where that goes in as well. But just wanted to say that there's two separate tracks that we kind of look at it. One is the new projects and then one is the existing facility projects. So that's how we try to define what's in text and then what's in the software separately.
Thank you for that clarification. Jackie?
And a little bit just to take off of what Dr. Gandhi said, which also maybe to Greg's point on some other buildings with secured entrances now. Once this plan is approved, I will start working on the long-range financial plan. And in that, you will see we look at the building fund and try to build in these projects. So you will see those others. We only go out about 5 years, but we still have all of those on our radar, so they haven't been forgotten.
Thank you. Robin?
Just a little bit about the process, and thank you for bringing up the long-range financial plan. This is based on a set of assumptions so that you can build your finances. So that doesn't mean the assumptions can't change along the path, but this at least gives you a guideline for planning. So to everybody's point, nothing is set in stone, but in order to function going forward responsibly and take care of our existing facilities, these assumptions need to be made, just like a budget planning assumption basis. Thank you for this, because it's a lot of work.
Thank you. So we have had a motion to approve our updated long-range facility plan as provided and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, thanks everyone. Tara, I'll have you call the roll.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Berkland,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Day,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
President Newman.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, we will move on to board reports. First up tonight, we have a committee work goals. And this is really just something we do sort of at the start of each year. I would invite committee chairs, if your committees have discussed as of yet, or if you've met, to share about your goals for the year. If anyone's interested in doing that. Yes, Robin.
Well, I don't know if they would be goals as much as we have a planning calendar that is a live document, and anybody from governmental affairs, please correct me if I'm wrong as I explain this, but what our work during a legislative session is very much tied to the legislative agenda itself throughout the year, and we kind of backfill there. So a lot of what we'll be doing is planning for the upcoming session, planning our positions document, planning some visits with our legislators and how to proceed during the year. But we're kind of at the legislature's mercy for our work plan. But I don't even know if I'd call it a work plan as much as a working calendar to keep ourselves on track. Can anybody else, and this is pretty general because it works. Does anybody else from the committee have anything to add that we discussed at our meeting? I can get really specific, but I don't want to bore y'all. But this is a public document as well.
I've served on that committee for 2 years. It's not boring, so thank you. That actually makes sense.
I love it. It's the most exciting committee there is, right, Tracy?
Thank you. Yes, Jim.
Well, planning has met a few times, obviously. We really haven't focused on identifying work goals because we don't have time to create our own goals. The administration has them for us. Our front and center work, I say that tongue in cheek. Our front and center goal this year is really to address a number of property issues as those come forward, and try to get the facts and data together for the board to make decisions. Obviously, we're still planning, I think, depending upon a number of factors, to look at the addition to Hawthorne for an early special ed center for the center of town. I think you're all aware of the fact that we are actually looking at acquiring a future property for maybe a high school, middle school, elementary school, who knows what all in the next 10 years that we might need. Nothing that we're going to build on tomorrow, but to buy the land before it becomes too expensive out in that southwest part of the city. Obviously, we're still trying to find a permanent long-term home for Dakota High School in our adult ed program as we try to decommission Agassiz. So there's number of different buildings and projects that the administration's researching that they'll be bringing to planning to look at. And then, as we recently just heard, we probably are going to be doing some exploration of what are options we could address some of our elementary issues on the north side of Fargo. So those are the property things, but as Jackie rightfully pointed out, now that we have approved a updated long-range facility plan, she and her team, along with planning, will be trying to update the long-range financial plan to make sure we know how we're going to pay for these things and when can we bring them online. And hand in hand with that, Seth and his committee will soon be starting with the negotiation process. So part of planning's work is going to be looking at our budget and trying to figure out what dollars do we have for our negotiating committee to put on the table for our certified teaching staff. So those will be the primary work of the committee this year, although other things come along the way, for sure.
Excellent, thank you. Nikki?
And the Communications, Engagement, and Advocacy Committee has met, and outside of Dr. Gandhi and myself, it's entirely new. So welcome to all 4 of our new members. We are currently taking a look at our work plan and working on creating that and tweaking that as we move forward. Our purpose being to improve communications coming out from the board as far as maybe some rationale as why we made decisions we made. We're also looking to reach out and engage with the community, with our staff. We're looking for ways to do that. We've reached out to the FEA to see if they might like to join us at one of our meetings so we can try to work on some things together. So we're making progress, even though we've only had just the 1 meeting, but we will have more coming up soon. So thank you.
Sounds good, thank you.
All right.
Seth?
The negotiations team has not met yet. We are in the process right now of putting a meeting together for the first week of November after we have our October 25th meeting, which I believe we have on our agenda, possible executive session. So hopefully the full board and can give us some direction that we can go into that first meeting for. And I guess as far as goals go, I guess, negotiations team has pretty much one goal, and that's to successfully negotiate a contract with the FEA here this summer. So that is the goal, and that is kind of our outline thus far. So
Sounds reasonable to me, thank you. Anyone else just want to speak on committee goals? Okay, thank you guys. We'll move on to committee liaison and correspondence reports. I'll start on your side tonight, Katie.
I attended the planning committee since our last meeting, and we all, as a board, did our negotiations training with the FEA.
Thank you, Greg.
The Health Insurance Committee had their first meeting of the year. More or less, it was kind of a recap of some high-level stuff related to health insurance and dental insurance from last year, and then kind of laying out a roadmap for the next coming year and maybe a little beyond. So not a whole lot of decisions being made or really in-depth substantive talks, but a lot of really good groundwork being laid for what I think could be exciting as far as health insurance is concerned, which is still probably not that exciting, but it'll be interesting. And then I also met last week with Bob and Missy about some of the standardized testing and that sort of data that takes place in the district, and kind of getting a good crash course in all of the really important data that we try and collect through standardized testing, what our response is to those tests, and so that Bob and Missy don't have to have a bunch of other people trying to schedule the same appointment and meetings with them unnecessarily. I'll put my 2 cents in that I think as someone who is generally skeptical of standardized testing, and also as someone who is very interested in data, I was pleasantly surprised with how well the conversation went when it comes to efficient, effective, and thoughtful use of all people's resources, administration, educators, students, all of their time. And I was pleasantly surprised.
That's great. Thank you. Nikki?
Thank you. September 16th, I served as the chair of the North Dakota School Board Association Nominating Committee and will present the slate of candidates at the annual meeting. September 19th, I attended governance, and September 24th, we had the training with the FEA to fulfill the negotiations MOU.
Jim?
You looked at a lot of planning work already this evening, and of course, we will be meeting again for more work. I was at governance, I was at our Kumbaya session with FEA, and I think that's it.
Thank you. Robin?
Well, clearly, I did not get a lot done the last week and a half, but I did make it to governance, and I apologize for missing the FEA meeting on Saturday because I was still under quarantine. And really just continuing to watch some of the media reports and press releases coming out from the state legislatively. So Melissa was very kind to send us the press release, and anything that you get, that if you want to send them my way, that'd be much appreciated. I'll put them in the library.
Great. Thank you. Seth?
Yes, planning and governance, and also last Saturday are very pleased to say that all of our MOUs are now complete from the last contract, as we're just about to go into a new one, finally. And coming up here next week on the 6th, I'll have my first meeting with the Native American Commission since that September meeting was canceled, so.
Excellent. Thank you. Nima?
Yeah, sure. I attended planning committee with our chair there, Jim. I have been volunteering. Now you guys can know. I've been volunteering at South High at least 4 hours per week, and practically didn't know algebra. God, it's been a long time. But helping them with homework, it was so rewarding, and just seeing teachers how exhausted they are. And I think you all should try it. It's awesome. I did meet with a couple of people outside the communities just to talk about lunch issues, and some parents are having a lot of concern. And so I thought maybe just we'll say that to you all. I attended community picnics, and I was flooded with a bunch of questions regarding their children being put to ESLs, even though they are born here as US citizens. And you probably will see a couple of them come showing up here of exactly what is the issues here. So I did my best. I said, just as I asked last time, I think Robin was talking about that too. I think I mentioned it to Robin a little bit, and something about federal. Correct me if I'm wrong too. You know, it's the federal issues over there, and some of it too is regarding the survey that they send to the family at homes. You know, when they just answer it there, and then like if there is a second language being spoken at home. So that was really a big concern to them because it's really, they feel like their kids has been falling behind because of it, and they don't like that policy. And then also too, I attended the FEA training on September 24th.
Thank you, Melissa.
Sorry, that was a long list.
No, not at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I attended the training with the FEA on Saturday, and other than that, I am hoping to reach out to my school liaisons this week since we've been in school a little over a month, just to check in with the three of them. So.
Great, thank you all. I will give you a brief president's report. I did a few media interviews on behalf of the board, WDAY and Joel Heidkamp, mostly in regarding our long-range facility plan. There was a lot of questions about that and our enrollment projections and programmatic needs and things like that. I attended an NDSBA Lunch and Learn. Governance has met, Planning Committee has met, and I too attended the training on Saturday with FEA. Thought that was a good process. Feels good to have it done, Seth, right? And then today I visited one of my liaison schools, Centennial Elementary, and just had a really lovely time. It's so fun to be back in the buildings. It just really feels like this is a more normal school year in many senses of the word. But I learned about catalyst training that they're doing with their staff there, which was really cool. And I actually got to see that in the classroom. I attended, Principal Olson invited me to their leadership meeting, which I think is a really cool thing he's doing too. So he has a subsection of the teacher staff meet regularly as a leadership group and then be the liaison to the rest of the staff. So it was really neat to sit in on that and hear the things they're worried about and things that are going well. They were using this new educator, it's called EduClimber tool, to look at their behavior incident reports. And that was, Greg, you would have gone crazy. You can you can pull out all these different, you can plot anything on this. And then you could compare yourself to other schools. It was very, very cool. But they're spending a lot of time on just school culture and safety. And I really appreciated that visit. And most importantly, I got to embarrass my own fifth grader when I walked in an art class. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, that's my mom." Okay, let's see. I also attended multiple events at Davies Homecoming Week, which was really fun. I think I stated earlier, FEA President Kim Rieger and I are meeting tomorrow as part of our effort of regular meetings. And then I just wanted to give a heads up that at our next meeting, which I'll affirm now, is October 11th, both Seth Holden and myself, and actually Katie Christensen, are unable to attend this meeting. So in accordance with GP 5, a presiding officer will need to be named at the beginning of that meeting. So it'll sort of look similar to the process that we do at the reorganization meeting. I will be in California attending the American Academy of Pediatrics National Convention, and I get to spend 2 full days with my Council of School Health Committee, which I'm really excited about, and I have to present, and I'm very scared. But anyway, I'll report back to you guys about that because we discuss like all things school policy for U.S. schools. I'm really excited. And I'm supposed to land next Tuesday at like 4:40, so I will try to call into the meeting, but I just don't think I can physically be here. Okay, I think with that, we affirmed our next meeting. So it is 7:11. Happy birthday, Jackie. We're getting out early.
Missy.
Oh, Missy and Anne Marie. Okay, we are adjourned.